The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Maynard Bangs presiding. The all eyes for the Honorable Judge Bangs.
Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus Baghead, a 2008 comedy horror about four indie actors who seclude themselves for a weekend in the woods to write a movie about a killer who wears a bag over their head. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, you are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Imagine my excitement at getting to watch this movie. It was an example of mumblecore, it said, and well, I love our dear correspondent Mumbly, so I figured this must be a winner. Unfortunately, Baghead gives us all the lowlights of the genre and none of the highlights. Now, we have to take into account part of the point of these movies is to be low budget and loosely acted, and the movie hits those marks. It looks cheap, it feels cheap. The actors certainly appear to be phoning it in. However, and this is what's really important, what ultimately sinks this movie, what ultimately gets this movie all the way to guilty to being bad is the ending. So spoilers will abound as we look at the sloppy conclusion to this sloppy film. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Jeremy Bates. Please present your opening statement.
Yep. Thank you, Your Honor. Look, I'll make it brief. The movie, I did a bit of research. It was filmed on about a $50,000 budget, and
it's all on the screen.
You're getting a whole hell of a bang for that. Look, when you have a budget like that, it comes down to the acting, and the acting was superb. The dialogue was superb. There wasn't really an unrealistic moment in the whole thing, which I came across, which is a far cry from a lot of the horror movies that you see now, big budget horror movies that you see now, on the screen or on Netflix or whatever. Look, I'll leave it at that for now. It is a low budget movie, but they did some great things with it.
Mr. Schlender, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will not beat around the bush. I have to go right for the throat. The ending kills this movie. Case closed.
Okay, Wait, okay. Not so fast. Not so fast.
I'll explain.
Objection. Are there going to be spoilers?
There will be spoilers. We have a warning in the beginning. So we can spoil. You can spoil any movie you want, except The Sixth Sense.
No. Yeah, we have a strict no Shyamalan rule that is never enforced. The idea of this film is that four actors are going off to the woods and they write a movie. The movie is about a bag-headed killer terrorizing them. And so basically they came up with the plot for Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, all four actors, there's two actresses, two actors, two boys, two girls. It's like this weird love rhombus that it's a little painful to watch. You have the chubby little guy likes Greta Gerwig. Greta Gerwig likes the tall, handsome guy. What did I say?
Gerwood.
Her name is Gerwig, though.
Yes.
All right, I want that in the record. Greta Gerwig, the director of Little Women. So anyway, and yes, it actually is that Greta Gerwig, not Greta Gerwood. She was unavailable, I am told. So Greta Gerwig is in love. Well, not in love. She's lusting after the tall, handsome guy. And the other actress and the tall, handsome guy, they have like this weird past relationship that's like, will they, won't they? She's like, oh, he's the love of my life. And he's like, we really ain't no thing. So that's the awkwardness that we have to deal with. We have to see the chubby little guy get shot down by Gerwig because, well, he's a chubby little guy and she's Greta Gerwig. She looks fantastic. He looks like a schlub. So he puts himself in the friend zone and he gets to rattle that cage the rest of the movie. It's not particularly interesting. But what we see then is how they
I'd like to pause here for a minute. And Mr. Bates, could you speak to this love rhombus, as it was put in, this four-sided love
That was a
triangle?
parallelogram.
Yeah, look, I think I actually thought the sort of romancing, I guess, in the film was done quite well because, yeah, look, every movie has a stereotype of a character, and you're gonna get a chubby guy, you're gonna get a good-looking guy, you can get a good-looking girl, bad-looking girl, whatever, or the Asian or a black guy or whatever. You're always gonna get a stereotype. It doesn't mean they're stereotypes. Like in this film, I thought that they came across as real friends. The dialogue between them was unlike, the cheap, 2-bit stuff that you hear in, as you referenced, like Friday the 13th Part 2, which I love, but I mean, it has pretty cringeworthy dialogue. This movie had stellar dialogue. It had real, I think, relationships. Even if you want to say some of those characters were stereotyped, look, if the loser friend wasn't chubby, if he was sort of like,
Like me.
if he was like, if he was like an A-list Hollywood star, you'd find he'd be stereotyped because he's the A-list Hollywood star, weirdly being, a second to the main guy who was, what was his name? Matt. Anyway, I'm just saying, Your Honor, that, like, you can't stereotype. I think the easy way to criticize a film is to just stereotype characters, and the stereotypes are there for a reason because they're usually real, and this film had real sort of characters.
All right, so you felt that the relationships were authentic?
I thought they were quite good.
All right, but that is bringing us to a broader point, Your Honor, about how the movie ultimately ends with all four of these people, because the bulk of this movie is their relationship, which is, it's just not particularly interesting because they try to punctuate these scenes throughout the movie with the Baghead guy actually showing up and scaring them, right? And it turns out...
So there is a real Baghead guy.
Well, here's the thing, Your Honor. There's the twist. Therein lies the rub. The first Baghead guy we see is possibly in Greta Gerwig's dream, right? And then Greta Gerwig actually sees the Baghead guy enter her room. It's like, oh my God, who's messing with me? Everyone's messing with me. It turns out it was the chick. The other chick, that is to say. And then the other chick and the chubby guy, they go missing. And it's like, okay, because presumably they're mad at the burgeoning relationship between tall, handsome man and Greta Gerwig. So they run off. And then they come back and scare him as the Baghead. It's like, oh, okay, they're just all messing with each other. But here's the thing. They knew they were being messed with the whole time. They called it immediately. It's like, they're messing with us. And then at the end, all four of them now in the same room, and the Baghead guy shows up and it's like, well, if you're here, you're here. Oh my God, it's a real Baghead. All right. So who is the
so
real
before
Baghead?
we move on, Mr. Bates, would you like to speak to the misdirection of the Baghead that goes on throughout the film?
It's not misdirection.
Yeah, I was just about to raise an objection, Your Honor. Look, that was the whole point of the plot, and during that
objection, plot is too generous.
That
overruled.
That misdirection is what created the tense. I'm not saying this movie's scary. It wasn't scary, really, even though it's classified as horror. It was more creepy, and there's this like creepy vibe that goes on through it.
Yeah, that was the chubby friend.
Yeah, he had a part to do with it. But that creepy vibe, a lot of that had to do with the misdirection and not knowing who was doing what or what, because it's about a film and a film type thing. And there, as the prosecutor said, there are four guys in a cabin trying to make a cheap film, and that's exactly what we're sort of watching. And I think what the directors wanted, and I think they're brothers because they both had the same. They're two guys, and they both had the same last name. But I think what they were going for wasn't like cheap scares or anything like that. It was a slow burn building up, and that sort of like ambiguity of who was doing what or what was happening to whom, or who is this guy with this bag on his head, and was it real or not? All that created the suspense and the creepiness that sort of, would get you through the hour and plus of the
Yeah, I would
film.
like to respond to that if I may, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So the problem is with this quote unquote suspense is that they immediately deflate it every time, right? So the first Baghead shows up, oh, it was a dream. Second Baghead shows up, oh, they're just messing with us. Third Baghead shows up. Now here we are getting to the end of the movie, Your Honor. So if you permit me to walk everyone through this, because I think it's really illustrative to the case here.
Proceed.
The new Baghead shows up, and all four members of our party are accounted for, so we know it's not them. And we think, oh my goodness, there actually is a Baghead. We have no reason to believe he's a crazy killer because he hasn't killed anyone, but he's got a weapon. So let's be careful. They run away from him. It's a 11-mile hike to the road, which, they drove in on the road. That apparently takes all day. It takes 12 hours. They leave at sunup. It's sunset. The Baghead guy comes out, presumably kills tall, handsome guy. Pandemonium ensues. Chubby guy gets hit by a car. You couldn't make this up, right? And then it turns out, wait. Baghead was just the fifth friend who we see at the beginning of the movie, who dropped this hint about guerrilla filmmaking, people not even knowing they're in movies. And so you think, okay, that's actually
hold
pretty
on,
clever.
objection, though.
I think objection to what?
I want to hear the defense's objection.
Okay.
If you were sort of following the movie and the nuances in it and stuff, you'd probably pick up that maybe the Baghead guy wasn't a real, Friday the 13th, and maybe because it was a film in a film about making a cheap horror film, I think maybe you could have sort of like sliced it together yourself that maybe they, the guy wasn't a real killer and they had set this all up. Having said that, and yeah, the sort of chubby guy, what was his name again?
Just refer to him as the chubby friend. It's fine.
The character has a name.
Anyway, the fact that Chad did die, it was a bit of a shock. But I think that the story going in that direction is a lot better than a lot of other horror movies, where right off the bat, this guy's here, and you mentioned Friday the 13th, so I'll mention again, and I do love the Friday the 13th movies, but right away that this guy is after them, and he's going to chase them down. The bad guy right off the get-go, and he's going to be killing frats and frat guys and sorority girls and everything through the rest of the movie. And then that's that's a letdown, because there's nothing really that you're left waiting for. In this movie, you have the teases with the Baghead guy on a number of occasions, like the prosecutor mentioned, but you never know what's going on until the end. And then that's the whole rub there, is that you either will like this ending or you won't, because it is, you have to end a movie, and you have to sort of wrap everything up together. And there are going to be people who hate the ending. There are going to be people who like the ending. But from my perspective, if you got to the ending, you probably liked the film. You didn't just shut it off. And I'd rather have 90 minutes of enjoyable film, and then have like an ending which might be other than like watching a movie and after the first 10 minutes being like, what the hell? I've seen this 1,000 times before.
Yeah, so let me focus on the ending, Jeremy, because I like the idea of the ending. I think it is a clever idea that suffers from poor execution, because this is the final twist, Your Honor. The Baghead was the other director, and they were filming the friends when the last Baghead shows up. But the movie goes on to tell us at a glacial pace, mind you, for the last 15 minutes of the movie, it's borderline insufferable, that they come up with the idea after the fact. Now, if the idea was to film them the whole time they were in the cabin, I think the movie lands. I think it would work. I would say not guilty. But the fact of the matter is that's not what happened. They come up with this idea of filming them for the movie well after a lot of the drama and scary stuff has already happened. So what would actually have been caught on tape would be the Baghead guy standing outside, maybe getting a little bit of the fight, But then everyone's in the house scared, but they boarded up the windows. So they couldn't film in, and there were no cameras in the house. So he's just filming the house and then presumably filming them on their nature hike before he attacks them again. The actual drama and meat of the footage that would have made this movie within a movie within a movie thing actually interesting is not caught on camera by their own admission. So that's really the problem. And then the friend in the hospital bed, he's looking at this and he goes, "Oh man, this is good. We got to edit this and send this to film festivals." And you're going to be showing them an hour of a house and 4 people going on a nature hike. That the drama was completely missed. And that's why the movie's bad. They stepped on their own feet. They got tripped up. All they had to do was say, "Look, we were filming this the whole time. The cabin was set up with like 2 cameras, right? We caught it all on footage. We got all the drama, all that human stuff that we say we like. That's what we got." But they didn't get any of that. And that wraps up my first exhibit.
All right, great.
It completely fumbles.
Defense, would you like to speak to this point?
Yeah, I just say that it's not Big Brother where there's cameras throughout the house and it filmed everything that was going on. I don't think that was the point of the directors. I think they sort of had the idea of, any 4 yahoos with a camera can make a film. And I guess his message is just because the movie is cheap and made outside of Hollywood doesn't make it bad. And yeah, you can pick at the plot. You can pick at, look, if that's the best you can pick at a plot, just go watch like the biggest, latest $200 million Marvel movie. And you could just destroy that on little inconsistencies and things like that.
We have fun doing that here.
I plan to. Stay tuned for the Thor Ragnarok episode.
What they've done here though is that I don't think the directors wanted to make it like a Big Brother where they had cameras rolling all the time. It was more about the message that they were sending, and like just capturing the real feelings and the real dialogue of 4 people who go to a cabin with a camera and decide, yeah, okay, so they weren't deciding to make a movie, or I think they were deciding to make a movie right at the start, but they weren't. The rest of the guys, aside from Matt, who pulled off the stunt at the end, weren't in on the whole thing. That doesn't really matter. I don't think
but
that
correct
matters.
me if I'm wrong. They were there to write a movie, right?
They
Not
were there
necessarily
to
make it.
They were there to write the movie, and this is why this movie actually has a lot of different levels. So you can look at it in different ways. But so 3 of the 4 cast weren't there to make the movie. The 4th guy had this idea in the back of his head to halfway through start scaring them and getting some real stuff down on film. But now you're just sort of like picking apart tiny little things. I think the overall idea was to get, like to make a sort of like a what's the word? It's not a
Like
moral,
a hangout
like
movie?
Like it's just, like I just don't want to say like these guys weren't doing a good job because you can pick apart the plot a little bit. They had, like I said at the beginning, they had $50,000. They had great actors, great dialogue, and they did a good job. And like I'll just leave it at that.
Well, okay, just to put a pin on it, is I think the idea of them doing the movie within the movie and scaring them is a good idea. I think the execution was I just don't think it landed. We'll let the jury decide. So anyway, Your Honor, like I thought for like this next exhibit, it would be kind of cool if I just gave like the direction, I just kind of set the scene. It's just set the tone, right? And then like Jeremy and I, we could just kind of talk in character and we just kind of feel out what happens, right? So like, let me go ahead. I'm going to put on my shaky mic effect, right? Here we go. We're getting this all in one take, no editing, like just do it like super raw, right? Now this exhibit, it really needs to pad out the rest of the case. So like, let's just go ahead and like throw some ideas out, right? Like I think we should do Titan AE on the show, right? I mean, like, Don Bluth is like awesome, and Titan
cool.
AE is at like 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. So
Sure.
it's like that's a case, right? Like right. We get together, we talk about Titan AE,
So you just attack. So the idea is mumblecore in your point, just does not work. Is that what you're?
My point is mumblecore can work. There's great examples of it, like Get Out, for example. But I think leaning on it as heavily as we see in Baghead, it doesn't lead to anything interesting. You don't get invested enough in the characters to really care about their love rhombus. It just seems so pat. Do you care about the love rhombus?
Yeah, I actually did, because...
Well, you have to, because you're the defense. I want that.
Hey, I want to hear his objection, prosecution.
Thank you, Your Honor. There was a scene where the girl, the woman, not the bitchy Catherine one, the Michelle. I think you guys were calling her Greta. Greta's her real name.
Yeah, Greta Gerwig.
Yeah,
the
okay.
Director of Little Women.
The character name was Michelle, and she was sitting in her room. And I don't want to keep calling him the chubby guy, but Chad came in, and he was trying to, because he had this attraction towards her, and he was trying to like hit on her. When I watched that, there is so much bad dialogue in movies these days. It's just, it's cringeworthy. This was, I don't know if you guys have, you're on here, and others, you've seen like a movie way back in the day called, I think it was called Kids. It was about a couple of kids. I think they got AIDS or something. It was really hardcore, and it was like really sort of, the dialogue sort of made it, because it made it real. When these two guys, Chad and Michelle, were sitting in this room, and he was trying to hit on her and trying to kiss her, whatever, and she obviously didn't want it, but he was his friend, and he wasn't going to just say like, get lost. It was real. It was touching. It was fantastic dialogue, and you could sort of see the just in the nuances of their sort of reactions, and just how real these characters were. You don't get that in many movies these days. You don't get that, because it's all, unless Anthony Hopkins sometimes does like ad-libbing when he does his roles, and that's why he's great. But you don't get ad-libbing and real dialogue like that usually, and that was a fantastic scene, I think, which goes to just sort of underline the point that the movie had, if you don't love the plot, the movie definitely had a great cast and dialogue.
Yeah, but the dialogue in service of what? We just get to see the chubby friend get rejected. And I, for one, do not endorse his predatory behavior. So I will not be endorsing that. I will also not be endorsing the other woman sneaking up on Greta Gerwig just to see her tits, or on screen, so that's probably going to sway the jury more than anything you and me say, to be honest with you.
Well, look, that's sort of like that's sort of run-of-the-mill horror stuff. If you don't have a pair of tits in a horror movie, like it's not a horror movie.
Fair.
It just happens, and you can argue against any horror movie because they all show them.
And I just might do that.
So, but then, defense, you're saying that nudity is playing with the trope of it in horror movies.
Yeah, I think the whole movie was playing with the trope of horror movies. Like, it was a whole, I don't know if the whole movie was poking fun at, that you can make a low budget movie and it'd be good, or if a low budget movie without Hollywood and, all these producers interfering is better. I don't know if they're poking fun at that or not, or what they're doing. But regarding the nudity, I think it sort of fit into the plot, because if you didn't have that, because it worked well. It wasn't just some girl standing in a shower and you have the guy with the knife creeping up on her. There was a reason why she flashed him, because she thought it was the interest, Matt, that she liked, and not Chad. So it played into the plot, and I think it was okay.
I think it was exploited. They had $50,000 to use. They figured they might as well get some tits on the screen.
Jesus.
But Your Honor, I really just want to hang my hat on how
thin
much
ice prosecution. You're on thin ice.
I know what I'm up against here. I'm not naive, but I do want to rest. I'll rest my case there. Just hanging my hat on. They really freaking botched the ending by their own standards, and I will rest there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bates. Do you have any further exhibits you'd like to present for your case?
Well, I guess I have to bring up that ending, because the prosecutor keeps mentioning how terrible it was.
Every movie has to mention more.
Well, look, every movie, everything has an ending, and people, if you're a fan of horror, you're probably a fan of Stephen King. And I'd have to say that Stephen King, his work, his books, and obviously the movies that are made of them have some of the worst, and he just does not know how to end a movie.
Objection, the defense has a financial interest in trashing Stephen King.
Overruled, because King's endings are pretty painful.
No, they are. Who am I kidding?
And look, because sometimes with horror, you just run with something, and then you run up against this wall because it's the ending, and you have to close it. I think, look, if you like how, and he's grossed hundreds of millions of dollars on his movies, and people like them. So if this little movie for $50K ends with the ending it did, I think that ending is still better than a lot of the endings I've seen in bigger budget horror movies, because sometimes there's just not a way to end a movie that everybody's going to like. But if you can wrap up enough, tail ends of it, you're going to have a pretty good movie. And I think they did a good job. And, they touched the thing with this ending too, though. It wasn't about the stalker chasing him and Chad getting hit by the car. I thought the movie could have ended there, but it didn't. But then they went back to the hospital room. And then this is where the whole emotions and the characters and the dialogue sort of came back to play. And there was like a reconciliation with the characters, and they got along a little bit better. And then you sort of saw everything end in a nice sort of way. And that's not supposed to happen in horror movies, but it did in this one. And I thought it was justified, and I thought it was a pretty good ending.
I would just like to say again, I don't object to any of that nice stuff happening. I don't object to the contrivance of them being filmed. I'm just saying the impact of that twist, that final letting the air out of the balloon, it has no sting to it because it wasn't the idea the whole time. He comes up with it too late. If that was the whole movie, we have a real winner, but it's just so kludged together. It's very unpalatable, and it's very long, that last 15 minutes. It is a glacial pace.
If you didn't like the movie to begin with.
I did like the movie to begin with. Well, that's what's so unfortunate. That's why I had to bravely
prosecution. Let the defense make their point.
No, that's fair. If you like the characters getting up to that point, then you probably wouldn't mind the sort of. It was a bit soppy, I would admit, at the end. But if you did like the characters up to that point, I think you'd probably go with it.
All right. Any further points you'd like to bring up?
No, I rest for now, Your Honor.
Very good. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Schlender, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Look, I'm not naive about what mumblecore is all about. It is supposed to be low budget. It's supposed to have an improv kind of feel to it. It's supposed to be loosey-goosey, and we do get that with this. It's very much a typical genre picture in that respect. I think we can look at better examples of mumblecore in this mumblecore horror genre, something like Get Out, which I think typifies it a bit more. However, what really sinks this movie, and again, this is what I'm hanging my hat on, so the jury agrees with me, vote for me. If you think I'm full of it, then don't, is just that botched ending. They had all the pieces they needed to put together a tight little movie with a compelling twist by saying, look, the idea the whole time was we're filming you, we're capturing this raw human emotion, such as it was. We're getting all that, but that's not what they did. At the end, the twist, we find out it came too late. They filmed the house, they filmed the nature hike, and a guy getting hit by a car, and then he's in a hospital bed. And you know what? He's the chubby guy. He got the girl. Anyway, that's not real life. So that's my case.
Does he get the girl at the end?
Well, it's implied heavily, I would say. She does nuzzle up against him and coos and
I'll leave that up to the jury.
Yeah. Well, you can't object to my closing.
We'll let you speak to it in your closing, though. I would like to mention, you keep saying Get Out, but do you mean You're Next?
Oh, I do mean you're next. I'm glad
I
we're
was
Yeah.
friends in real
wondering,
life.
when was that in that?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
exactly.
right. Oh man, we're gonna have to go through and dub
Wow.
that over.
Embarrassing. I'm not. No, we're
Very.
keeping it in. I'm just going to
No,
let you make
very.
an ass of
You're
yourself.
right. I did mean you're
Yeah.
next, not Get Out. Yeah. Get Out's not mumblecore at all.
No.
Bobby
No.
must have been pulling his hair out this whole time. I'm sorry. my
Yeah.
friend.
It
Yeah.
bothered me too, but I want to see where you're going with it.
Yeah. No,
But thank you,
I
Mr.
wish you brought it up earlier.
Jeremy,
I did
you may
mean
present your closing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I guess one of the main things I'll say is that the ending is not the be all and end all of a film. Because if you're sitting there for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and you're enjoying everything tremendously, and then the ending comes, and there's usually a twist in the ending. Some people usually like these twists, some people don't. But I don't think you should be judging or sinking or praising a film based on the ending, how they close. I think it should be an overall thing. So if you're just focusing solely on the ending, like the prosecutor seems to be doing, I think you're missing 95% of what the film was and what you should have been watching. Really, as I mentioned in my opening, it was a $50,000 sort of homage to the Blair Witch Project, which was a fantastic movie, which amazingly grossed over $100 million because of things like it had authentic characters, had a great acting, and had great dialogue. I don't know if people actually you could throw up a huge debate whether the ending of Blair Witch Project was good or bad. Some people loved it, some people hated it. So I think that point about the ending is mute. I don't think that should be in the jury's decision whether this is a great film or not, because all horror movies end how they end, and most of the time they're not fantastic endings. So I think we should sort of just set that aside for a bit and just focus on the fact that this was a $50,000 movie made by a couple of brothers who were just, I guess they're questioning the democratization, if I can pronounce that right, of filmmaking. And is that good for the overall art form of film? Because as I mentioned earlier, anybody can sort of do this now if you get a camera, and if you're smart enough and you can sort of gather together some decent actors, you can go to a cabin in the woods, which might cost you like few $100 to rent the cabin, and then film a movie. And then is this supposedly supposed to stand up to like other horror movies that are have a budget of $50 million? Okay, so that's one thing, but I don't even think that's important, to how much the film costs. Because what it comes down to, and the biggest thing you can do if you don't have money for a film, is to make the dialogue work, make the characters work. That's what people care about. You can have two people sitting on a boat for two. One point is that I do love survival horror, I guess. Is it called survival horror? I'm not, like, two guys sitting on a chairlift, and that's the entire movie because they can't jump down because there's wolves below. Or that
Frozen. Great movie. Yeah.
And then there was another one like the surfer who's stuck on a rock because she can't go because there's a shark in the water, and that's that. And they both didn't really have great endings. And there's the other one, Deep Ocean or Deep Sea or something, where two scuba divers come, open
water. Yep.
Open water, where they pop up and their boat's gone, and they just look. These are all very cheap horror, but this is sort of the thing I like. Do the endings always grip you? Do they always knock, tying all the pieces? No, but that's why you suspend your disbelief, and that's why it's a film, and it's especially a horror film, which I think you have to suspend your disbelief even more. Anyway, so my final analysis would be: look, it was a cheaply shot movie. They did a fantastic job. They had some great characters. They had some great dialogue, and if you don't really like the ending, well, that's fine, because the rest of the movie, made up for it.
All right. Thank you very much. Members of the jury, Mr. Robb Maynard, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Our Movie Boyfriend, Ryan Luis Rodriguez, you have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
My father also used to put a bag over my head.
Oh, poor bailiff.
Bailiff, come on.
I do not like that mumblecore. I would like to show it right to the door. Ryan, what did you think?
Anything.
Well, first of all, I'm amazed we talked about this movie for half an hour because the characters in it could not have talked about it for this long. There's simply not that much to this film, but I was surprised by the fact that I watched this, let's see, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And I still remember what happened in it, which is definitely not been the case for a lot of the movies that we've discussed on this show, even movies that I've seen before. Mm-hmm. So that has to be something, right? Like, I guess I liked it. I don't know. I have no strong feelings about it. I
forgot completely about it.
See, I think there is a lot. I think that the meat, or actually almost all of this movie is really not about a killer. Or even them making a movie. It's the love rhombus that was described. I think I at least think that the other woman who's not Greta Gerwig is not really fleshed out that well. But the two guys are, I think, very well defined, and I think Greta Gerwig is fairly well defined. I think that obviously two guys wrote the movie, right? So women characters are never always that well fleshed out, sometimes by male writers. But the two guys feel definitely very authentic in their sort of tug of war over Greta Gerwig. And the handsome guy actually, is like, I'm not going to go for her, even though she's strongly coming at him. So I mean, that's the meat of the movie. If you're not interested in their interpersonal relationships within this cabin, you're going to be bored.
I did not care about these people, which, as you said, that definitely hurts it. I don't care about the love rhombus. I only know about I like you as a friend parallelogram. So, this really isn't my wheelhouse to care about this sort of thing.
But did you not?
I do disagree with.
Did you not find any sort of connection to Chad then, as a guy who's stuck with unrequited love?
No, not really. I mean, the way he behaves around all these people wasn't something that I, found admirable or anything. I was more about the horror. I wanted to see the Baghead guys, and that wasn't really what this was about, right. Which I disagree with the Defender, because I do think the ending is probably the most important part of a story, at least to me, because that's my takeaway. What was I supposed to go out into the world taking from this film? And that ending just doesn't deliver. It's very, very lazy.
Oh, I will give it credit, though. I did not anticipate the ending, even though they set it up clearly.
Oh, I did.
They foreshadowed the shit out of it.
He said, there's gorilla cameras.
But because I'm stupid, I didn't figure that out. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, really? What? No.
I've seen too many of these.
Because they set it up right in the beginning. Apes,
which is a movie that the ending that I love with a movie that I hate. Even though, even considering that, like, I was still watching this. I watched the two of these back to back, and I was just like, seriously? That was the resolution?
Yeah. I like the twist in this a lot. You're right. I didn't see it coming because, they set it up in the first 2 or 3 minutes, and it leaves your brain while you're watching the movie. You get sick into other stuff, so you forget that they know that guerrilla film director. And then it turns out to be him, and you're like, whoa, good twist. Sorry if people who spoiled it here, but that's what our show does. But when I initially saw it, I was kind of like, I agreed with the defense. I was like, why didn't they film the whole time? That would have been better. It's because filming them the whole time is cruel, and he doesn't want to be cruel to his friends until they kind of cock block him. They make him think that they've been killed by bagheads. They bust in on him while he is masturbating, and he's humiliated and he's angry. He does it as revenge. He wouldn't have wanted to guerrilla film this when he first gets out there. The reason he makes the decision halfway through is he gets mad at them. It's revenge to him. It goes too far when someone gets hit by a car, but it is supposed to be their comeuppance. And that didn't really strike me until the defense was describing it. That's, I think, why he did it. I'd like to lock in. Anyway, I do dislike all the hospital stuff. That does go too long, but it's not enough to spoil the whole film for me. I just wish they had trimmed that, or even just left it when they were in the truck leaving and they're kind of mad at the guy. That would have been a great ending. I would have left it there. But still, the acting is good. It does feel incredibly authentic. I do think the characters, those feel like genuine interactions, and I like the twist. So I'm definitely going not guilty.
Mr. Ryan?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that the prosecution had a much better case, but at the same time, I did not hate the experience of watching it. I don't think that I could go as far as to say that it's a bad movie, even though it has clear deficiencies that I can detect. But I mean, yeah, I guess I'm going to go not guilty.
All right.
Cool. So I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm the god.
Speak your heart.
Or not the god. I think there's two things. I dislike slow burn in horror, and that may be a taste thing. But it seems to me it's like, oh, we only had like a handful of good ideas. But the biggest flaw for me is I got my jury summons to see this film, and I did, and then it was postponed for a little bit, and I forgot completely about it. Almost everything that I know about this film now was brought up in this trial, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that was a thing, him masturbating, yeah, I completely forgot about that. Every single plot point in this just fell right off of my brain, and that ending. So it was a 2.5 50-50 film for me, but that sinks it a bit more. Plus, I do think the prosecutor's right on the ending, so I will go guilty.
All right, still two not guilties. So let's get out there and tell that a very, very handsome judge. Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Baghead, we find the defendant not guilty.
Hey, quiet you. Hold you in contempt. The verdict is...
I don't care anymore.
The verdict... Take him out of here, bailiff. The verdict is so rendered, Baghead is free to go and try to pursue some other roles in the field of filmmaking. Maybe try its hand at directing. Might work out. Who knows? Court is adjourned.
This is mumblecore reporting to you live from outside the Reels of Justice. I'm a filmmaker and stuff. Dylan J. Schlender, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict today?
Well, Mumbly, big fan, by the way. It was a just verdict. You know, I mean, we all agree that the ending fumbled, but is that really enough to get it to guilty at the end of the day? You know, that's why we bring these kind of movies to court. I thought it was a good case. I got to tip my hat to Jeremy. He had a lot of good rebuttals. He was putting up with me being an obnoxious dick. And also, I need to resign in disgrace for mixing up Your Next and Get Out for my whole case. So I will bid you all adieu.
I look forward to your resignation. And here comes Jeremy Bates. Excuse me, can we get a word on how you feel about today's verdict?
Yeah, I think it was a fantastic verdict. I didn't know it was going to be such an intense back and forth. If I did, I probably would have prepared a bit better for this case than I did. So props to the prosecutor, because he had a lot of fantastic points. But I do think it was a good verdict. And if I'm ever back in court, I'll do a bit more research so I know what I'm talking about next time a bit better.
Hey, you had the budget. You were fine, man.
Thanks a lot, I guess. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. Mumblecore out.
Mumblecore! Excellent. Great job, Jeremy. You won and then you flexed saying you weren't even all that prepared.
Yeah.
So way to really dunk on him. He beat you with one hand tied behind his back, Schlender.
Oh, I know.
You couldn't even name a Mumblecore movie. I actually looked and I didn't know some of these Mumblecore movies. I like a few of these, like Your Next, as you mentioned. The Ritual is excellent.
Yeah,
Late Phases is really good. So I may have to start going through this Mumblecore list. And I guess VHS and VHS 2 are on there too. So I might start going through some of these and watching some of these.
Now that we could drop the characters, actually I did like this movie quite a bit. I do think the ending could have been a bit tighter, but like basically what Jeremy said is like it really wasn't enough to sink it. But if anything was going to sink it, that would have been it.
Yeah. And I do think the hospital goes too long. But I overall, I like the twist. And I know Ben saw it coming, but I don't know how you set anything up without eventually someone's going to see it coming, right? Agatha
Oh, yeah.
Christie kind of rules. But Jeremy, you did a great job. Now, what has been keeping you busy? What have you been working on lately?
Yeah, so I just finished a book called The Dancing Plague, which is like a coming of age type thing. And funny enough, it's sort of it's sort of like Baghead in the sense, because it's sort of reflective of a book in a book type thing. So there's an adult character who's, well, the book is set in 1988, but then there are scenes which jump to the present, where the guy writing the book is looking back on the past, and he's writing about what happened, and sort of writing or recalling his memories or whatever. So that was a lot of fun, and it was sort of like this whole dynamic of looking back. And there's a second part, which I'm doing now. So that was like the 1988 part, and it's released, it's out there. And then it's like a 2-book series. So the next part is they're adults now, 31 years later. And that's what I'm sort of just started, like literally last week.
All right. And
That's
for some of our
awesome.
readers who might not be familiar with the kind of stuff
We
you
have
write,
readers?
some of our listeners who might not be readers of yours, kind of tell us what sort of stuff you write.
So it's mostly, it's horror, but there's 2 main series. The one is called World's Scariest Places, and the second is called World's Scariest Legends. So the thing is, which I realized a number of years ago, is that if you were going to write series always do better as books. Like if you have a series, people read one book, they go to the next book. This is why everybody writes series, because they sort of just feed the last reader into the next book, and it's much better for you, sort of like find commercially, I guess. But the thing with horror is that it's so hard to make a horror series, because based on what happens in horror novels or horror movies or whatever, so many people die. Even if they survive to the next book, they're going to be so shook up and traumatized that they can't be the lead character for the next book. And imagine pulling this poor character through 5 books. There's just no way. That I don't really know any horror series, because you can't have a good horror book and just have the character come back fresh and ready for the next one. Anyway, having said that,
Unless the monster is the main character.
well, okay, so that's a really good point. So what I did with these 2 series is that the first one, The World's Scariest Places, is that I made a series, but not based on a monster or the character. It was based on places. So the first book was Suicide Forest in Japan, where I used to live in Japan.
Not in the forest, though, right?
Yeah, no. Well, I visited, but I didn't live there. Catacombs, places, Island of the Dolls in Mexico, Mountain of the Dead in Russia, and then that was fun. But then I thought, well, what if you do the same thing but using legends? Because there were other things I couldn't touch because they weren't based on places, but there were some great legends. So then I did one called The Sleep Experiment, and then Merfolk, which is based on mermaids and mermen. Do they exist? And so I found a way to sort of make a horror series work, because they're not based on the characters, because they either die or they're just traumatized by the end of it. But it survives through having the relation of either the place, or I guess the fact that they're all based on legends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of cool locations. I know the Suicide Forest is one. There's a lot of haunted or abandoned mining towns, in Chile and Japan. So there's definitely a lot of locations to keep moving through.
Well, it's funny because you always hear writers saying "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. What's my next book going to be? Where am I going to get this idea from?" But when you have a series like this, you just Google, "What's a scary place?" Hey, Google, "What's a scary place?" And you get a list of 15, and you're like, all right, I'll choose that one. It's a lot easier than a lot of these guys are putting themselves through with their
Here's what I would do. You should just watch through Destination Truth with Josh Gates, because he just goes to all those places. He went ghost hunting in the Suicide Forest, and he went to the Island of the Dolls.
Yeah.
And he went ghost hunting in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt.
Yeah, I think I might have seen him. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's super cool. He's a living Indiana Jones. Love Josh Gates. Hope we get him on one day.
So, Jeremy, if one of your books got made into a movie, because we're a movie podcast, which one would you pick, you think?
I've actually had I've had some like a fair bit of interest from some pretty respectable guys, like the guy who made the producer who made the Stephen King reboot.
Nice.
He contacted me. The production company who did their Harry Potter books into movies contacted me. Like it was a bit crazy at first when somebody would contact you like that, but then I've sort of since realized that they might just be doing that to 1,000 people, because nothing has ever come through. Like you get all these offers and like these interest, and people are like, oh, is this series under contract with film and TV? And then you're like, no, it isn't. Do you want it? And then you don't hear from them again. It's weird. Like it's just like they just reaching out.
Next time, tell them it is, and maybe they'll start a bidding war.
Or you tell them it's close, yeah. Just about to sign with CBS.
Well, the funny thing is, so with the movies, I think, and this is the thing too. Like, I think Suicide Forest would make a good movie in it, but
I agree.
But they made a movie called The Forest, which was totally different. It was a bit, it was just different. And then the second movie, and the second movie was, the second book was The Catacombs. But then people looking at the movies were like, oh, there's just been a movie made called As Above, So Below, or something like that.
Love that movie, yeah.
The Catacombs one. So it's like, and these movies were literally made at the time I was publishing. So like, it's not they took the idea from me or I took the idea from them. They were just made at the same time. And one of these guys said, oh, we can't do it because, like that movie's just been made like 2 years ago. We can't go revisit that, which is, you're like, oh, that's shit. But
yeah,
I think like that, having said that, I still think like, because the movies were so different than the books, I still think Suicide Forest or The Catacombs would both probably make pretty good movies.
There's a haunted Romanian forest too. That's cool to check out too.
Yeah, so Jerry, when I got to the end of Suicide Forest, I love the twist. I won't spoil it here because actually, if anyone has Amazon Prime, you can read it for free through Amazon Prime, which is what I did. And it's great, and you have a great flair for action at the end too, where everything kind of ramps up. And then it was the same thing with Merfolk too. I think you could write some good action novels too. I mean, you have.
Well, it's funny you say that though, because most of both of those books are the slow burn thing, which leads up to it. I never thought I was great at action, like because you read like action writers, like people who just focus on the action, like James Patterson or his ghostwriters, I guess, and Clive Cussler back in the day. And they're really good at that. Most of my stuff is sort of like a slow burn dialogue and atmosphere, which is, I guess, why I like Baghead so much, because that sort of reflects, that's just sort of what I do. But I never thought so. Well, thanks for that. I'm glad you thought that, because I never really thought I was good at writing action.
Hey, is that underwater like AK-47 from Merfolk, is that based on a real thing or did you make that up?
No, don't make anything up. That's based on the Russians invented that, and it's all true. And you can,
That's
it's
awesome.
actually, you can buy it on the market now. If you, I don't know if you're a scuba diver, but if you want to, carry around an automatic rifle underwater, go for it.
Cave diving frightened me before you threw in murderous mermaids, so I'm not going scuba diving anyway. My goodness.
Yeah, anything like with an enclosed ceiling over you like that, terrifying. Like, no, I'm claustrophobic. I hate it.
So Jeremy, we always ask for recommendations. Actually, before we move on, can we just get the names of your series too, in case people want to look for them?
So the first series is called World's Scariest Places. And the second series is called World's Scariest Legends.
All right, cool. All right, good. So hopefully we can check that out. And I know a lot of them are on Prime, as Schlenzo said. So now we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So what is a movie that our listeners should check out?
Yeah, I have two. And this surprised me because I would have probably thought a little bit more, but the two always stick out with me. One is called pi. I think it's. I'm not sure if they use the mathematical symbol, but it's called pi.
Yeah, from 1998. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, and I remember watching that back in uni and back in those days, smoking a lot of weed and stuff, and I just wow, you can you can read the stock market as like a living AI type, and it was just fascinating back then. The whole thing's filmed in black and white, if I remember, but
Yes.
it was a fantastic. Like it was just really good, and it was so different. Look, it's not horror, it's not I don't know what you'd say it is, but it was just a really good movie. And back in the day, back in university, because when I went to Blockbuster and I rented it and I had to get the physical cassette and watched it, we'd go over a friend's house and they'd be like, oh, anybody have a good movie recommendation before we went to Blockbuster? And I'd be like, oh, there's this great movie, Pi. And then they'd see and they're like, black and white, man, fuck off. Like, they're not going to watch a black and white movie. So they didn't really watch it. But I recommend it as a really good movie. The second one is actually from the same era. And I watched it back in those days too. I haven't seen it since, so I can't really, as like an older, not a uni sort of mindset, say it was fantastic. But I remember it, and it was a really good movie. But it's called The Spanish Prisoner with Steve Martin, and that was fantastic. It was so outside his sort of like wheelhouse. Like, it was just not what he did at the time, but he was amazing, and the movie had some amazing twists, and it was one of these like movies that you just start watching and you have no idea what's going on or what's going to happen, and then it just turns out to be amazing. So those would probably be my two recommendations.
Oh, excellent. No, I'll have to check out that other one. Steve Martin doing not Steve Martin things always sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Schlenzo, you were the other lawyer, so what is your recommendation?
Well, thank you, Maynard. Look, I don't know if we're ever going to have another Australian on the show again, so I need to take this time to recommend my favorite Australian movie, which just so happens to star the only recording artist I love more than Air Supply, and that's Laura Branigan. You see, Laura always dreamed of being an actress, but was never offered any parts, until one day she was offered the lead in an Australian picture. She put her recording career on hold and went down under in 1988 to film Backstage. The movie Backstage is about an American pop singer that always dreamed of being an actress, but was never offered any parts, until one day she is offered the lead in an Australian play. She puts her recording career on hold and goes down under to act in The Green Year Passes. Seriously, we lost Laura Branigan far too soon, so join me in honoring her by watching Backstage on YouTube for free.
All right, great.
Yeah,
I was actually the judge this week, unlike that other week where I was fake the judge. It didn't know.
That fake judge.
But this time I actually was. So since we're talking about kind of self-aware slasher films, I have to recommend an entry in the Scream franchise. So why not the latest one, 2022's Scream? The fifth entry into the series and the first to not be directed by Wes Craven, Scream plays around with the recently popular concept of the requel, a film which revisits elements of a prior film in the series, but is not a reboot, as it kind of includes the previous film in its continuity. It was the logical next step in this franchise, but I understand if people begrudge its predictability. However, I do think that was the point. Fans of the series will probably be split on this one, but hell, when are they not? See it for yourself and then decide. Scream is currently only playing in theaters as of this recording, but by the time this episode releases, who knows? It might have made its way to Paramount Plus. Ryan, what have you got for us?
This week I'm recommending a movie that I saw in theaters just the other day, another film from Baghead distributor Sony Pictures Classics. It is Pedro Almodovar's Parallel Mothers. I found it to be an emotional, striking, beautifully designed little picture about lineage and loss, with a tremendous lead performance by Penelope Cruz. I'm not sure when this episode drops, so it may no longer be in theaters, but Netflix has the rights in Latin America, so maybe it'll be streaming there later on. But no matter what, you should track it down and watch it or whatever.
It's Spanish and subbed?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I know it got some Oscar noms.
Yes, I think Penelope Cruz got nominated. I hope so.
Yeah. And I know Larry Blamire said that he really enjoyed it too. It
well, he knows what he's talking about. He's a smart man.
He does.
Can I just add one thing, because the Australian an Australian film was mentioned. I feel like because I'm Canadian, but living here, I should have mentioned maybe an Australian film. There's a fantastic early 1970s film called Dawn's Party, and that would be my third recommendation. Because if you want to see sort of what life's not like that now in Australia, but back in the day, that's how it was, and they do a really good job. So early 1970s, and it's called Dawn's Party.
Oh, there you go. There's another one. I don't know. I think I've seen that one, but I know I've heard of that one.
Australia is so far away; it's literally tomorrow today, right there, right now. That's how crazy it is.
Please no spoilers on what's going to happen tomorrow. Big Ben, send us on home with your recommendation.
I'm going to go in a different direction this time around and shout at an online film festival I've been watching called JFF Plus, and recommend a Japanese film that I really enjoyed called The Chef of South Polar. It's based on 2 autobiographies of a man who actually served as the chef of an Antarctic research team. And if I was sent to Antarctica with an American team, I'd expect nothing but MREs the whole time. But send me there with this guy, because he makes such delicious looking dishes throughout the entire film, going to great lengths to serve those special meals for each member of the team, sometimes with very limited means. Japan has such a cool relationship with food, not just preparing it correctly, but also focusing on the way that the dish is presented. It's not available for streaming anywhere that I could find, but hey, check out the festival next year and you might find your own little hidden gem.
Okay. Is that one did you say it was a horror?
No, it's just
okay.
the film festival I've been watching that's going on right now.
He just cooks for people and then...
Sounds
everyone's
scary to
happy.
me. I don't know about you, but cooking for people, that's terrifying.
Where's the conflict? Is he get an order
the
wrong?
Food poisoning scene is just terrifying.
Yeah, some sort of conflict, right? But then one of them turns into a shape-shifting monster, and that's when it really starts getting interesting. You saw that
Different film.
Different
I won't let all this film secrets out of the bag, though.
All right, okay. But no, lots of good suggestions this week. And with that, we are all out of show, but we want to thank our guest, Jeremy Bates, for joining us. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep, we'll have you back very soon. And we hope everyone else will join us again as well, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
Baghead.
Mumblecore.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.